The movie opens in a factory in France, where several workers have stormed the owner's office for justice. They are demanding that he claim responsibility for the recent accident that injured many workers. However, the arrogant owner claims he's not at fault and refuses to compensate for the damages. This enrages the factory workers, and they start wreaking havoc in the office. They trash the place upside down and lay hands on the owner. The police soon arrive, but even they are unable to contain the angry mob. One of the workers, Michael, gets so angry that he gets on top of a cop and starts choking him. Michael is not going to be a main character in this story. Turns out his girlfriend Karen was also one of the victims of the accident, and he's trying to get justice for her. But he is quickly subdued by the other cops, who restrain him and take him under arrest. The movie then cuts to several months later, where Michael is seen chilling at home. Guess I was wrong. He has been released from prison, but he's not allowed to leave the city. An ankle monitor is tracking his movements all the time. Michael has also divorced his wife Elise and is currently living with his girlfriend. She is still bedridden due to the injury sustained from the accident. Next, we are introduced to Michael and Elise's teenage daughter, Selma. Once a cheerful girl, her life has been turned upside down due to her parents' divorce. She is now distant from her friends and always acts coldly towards others. One day, during her horse riding classes, Selma notices her friends watching the video of her dad's arrest. They chuckle and make fun of the incident. This enrages Selma, and she retaliates by rubbing horse poop on her friend's face. Always carry horse poop in your pocket just in case. As a consequence of her actions, her mother is summoned to the principal's office. Selma is then sternly warned that if she doesn't change her attitude, she will be kicked out of the school. That night, Selma goes to her dad's place to spend the weekend. As she watches the television, she learns that Latin America is experiencing rain, which is 100 times more acidic than normal. This is caused by years of global warming and pollution. The rain has destroyed rainforests and killed thousands of animals. Scientists predict that it is only a matter of time before it reaches the northern hemisphere. Selma is intrigued by the news, but her dad closes the television, advising her not to believe in such bullshit. They're just trying to get you to vote for Trump, honey. One night, while she is asleep, it suddenly begins raining. Elise realizes that her daughter has left the window open, so she closes it and puts a towel on the floor to soak up the water. Unbeknownst to her, the towel's color changes, indicating that the water is acidic. The rain finally stops the next morning, but it is still very cloudy and gloomy. By this time, there have been several incidents of people getting injured by the rain, so the country is on high alert. When Elise finally reads the news, she becomes worried for her daughter, who has just left for school. She tries to contact her phone, but to no avail. Left with no options, Elise contacts her ex-husband, Michael, and briefs him on the situation. The latter becomes worried as well, so they decide to go to Selma's school together and bring her back. Unfortunately, when they reach the school premises, they learn that the students have gone for a horse ride in the woods. They're not scared because of the rain. They're scared because they didn't know they were paying for shit like that. The duo immediately rushes to the location, but hundreds of other parents are also waiting to retrieve their kids, which has caused a traffic jam. At this point, Elise steps out of her truck and notices dark clouds forming above them. So she and her husband get off the road and hurry to save their daughter. Elsewhere, we see Selma and her horse alone in the woods. Turns out she is a very bad rider, so her friends have left her behind. Just then, a few drops of rain begin to fall, burning the twigs and leaves on the ground. This also affects the poor horse, and it starts running away in panic. Outside the woods, the parents realize that the truck cannot go any further, so Michael decides to continue on foot. Fortunately, he manages to find Selma as she comes out of the woods on her own. The two then take shelter in the nearby stable just before it starts to rain heavily. However, the place turns out to be unsafe, as several droplets of acidic rain start leaking from the ceiling. This sends Michael into a state of panic, so he hurriedly calls his wife to inform her of their location. Elise then drives through the heavy rain and low visibility, but she somehow manages to reach the stable. After this, the family hops into the truck and they get away from there. Along the way, they hear the terrifying screams of people being burned to death by the rain. What's wrong with this stuff? They eventually reach the main highway, but find that it is still blocked due to traffic. With their trucks slowly disintegrating due to the rain, Elise knows that they don't have much time, so she plows through several cars. At one point, their back door suddenly opens, and an injured man tries to get in, but Michael kicks him away and shuts the door hard. They probably could have helped that guy, but whatever. Then, Elise finds an opening and drives away at top speed, narrowly avoiding disaster. A few hours later, the rain finally stops, and we see the carnage it has caused. Numerous people are lying dead on the streets, and several objects have melted beyond recognition. Meanwhile, the family is still on the road, and they are looking to leave the country. But their truck soon breaks down because of all the acid damage it has taken. This forces the family to seek refuge for the night in an abandoned house. To their surprise, the place has been decorated for a birthday party, which sadly couldn't commence. They also find a pet cat eating away the birthday food alone. Selma tries to pet it, but her mother stops her, saying its fur could be acidic. In the meantime, Michael finds the water supply running, but he isn't sure if it's safe to drink. He thinks for a while and decides to test it on the cat by putting some water in its bowl. This whole family is sociopathic. However, Selma doesn't like the idea, so she immediately empties the bowl into a sink. Elise then finds some bottled water, and the family takes turns sipping it little by little. Later, they eat some food from the refrigerator and use tinfoil to cover their feet. This provides them momentary relief from the catastrophic situation they are in. Michael then goes to check on the bowl from earlier, and shockingly discovers that it is melted. This means that the tap water is not safe to drink at all. It's only about as safe as a glass of Coca-Cola. A few hours later, the parents fall asleep, but Selma is unable to do so because of the sound of raindrops outside. Turns out it has started raining again, and some droplets are seeping in through the ceiling. Selma then goes to check on the cat, only to find it in a bloodied and lifeless state. This upsets her deeply, and she hurries back to her mother for comfort. In the morning, it stops raining, and the family hits the road on foot. They find thousands of others just like themselves, desperate to leave the country. After hours of journeying, they arrive at a bridge where police are only letting a few people pass due to safety reasons. But the angry crowd doesn't seem to care, and they keep on pushing. During the chaos, Elise is pushed further up and separated from her family. It's now her turn to cross the bridge along with some other people. Elise tells the cops that she can't go on without her family, but they don't care and ask her to proceed. Unfortunately, just as she reaches a bit further, the bridge suddenly begins to collapse. Many people are crushed by the debris instantly, while others are trampled in the stampede. Elise tries her best to reach her family, but she's trapped amidst the raging crowd. Then, the railing behind her breaks, plummeting her into the water with several others. This causes her skin to burn and melt, and she screams in fear. When Selma sees her mother struggling in the water, she rushes to help her, but Michael intervenes. The two can just watch as poor Elise suffers an agonizing death in the water. In the aftermath of this incident, the military escorts the people away in their trucks. They are taken to an army barrack where they are given food and shelter. Michael uses this opportunity to contact his girlfriend, and they finally talk after a long time. In the morning, the civilians are divided into groups and loaded into trucks. They are then taken to a forest where they will have to continue the rest of the journey on foot. The army officials are leading them with red flares so that no one gets separated. Sometime later, the clouds begin to show up again, and this sends everyone into a state of panic. The people start running to save their lives, but Selma keeps tripping due to nervousness. Michael does his best to keep her moving, but this slows them down and they are separated from the rest of the group. Luckily, they find a tunnel nearby and take refuge in it just before it starts raining. The two then navigate through the dark tunnel, but disaster strikes when Michael slips and falls on the ground. The acid humidity burns his leg, causing him excruciating pain. Regardless, they continue walking until they come out of the tunnel. It has stopped raining, and the clouds have also subsided. The father and daughter then walk for hours until they come across some houses. Michael tries banging on one of the doors to be let in, but gets no response. This takes up the remainder of his energy, and he ends up collapsing on the floor due to exhaustion. Seeing this, Selma rushes over to him and starts screaming for help. When Michael regains consciousness, he finds himself in the house of one of the residents named Deborah. She appears to be a strict woman who lives with her little son. Deborah provides bottled water and fresh clothes to Michael, but refuses to share food because she's already low. Later, as Selma wanders around upstairs, she notices the walls stained by acid. She also finds a device covered by plastic and tries to touch it, but Deborah stops her. As the two chat, the woman reveals that the device is used for her son's dialysis treatment, but sometimes they can't come upstairs due to the leaking ceiling. When Michael learns of this, he selflessly carries the device downstairs so that the boy can safely undergo his dialysis. Deborah is grateful for his help, so she finally agrees to share food with them.
Hope you like cornflakes.
That night, the father and daughter decide to sleep in the garage as they believe it is much safer there. But as soon as they turn off the lights, Deborah closes their door from outside. She then goes to her son and lays beside him, waiting for the inevitable to come. Soon, it rains heavily and the house starts leaking with water. The taps and electrical wires begin melting while acidic fumes come from different holes. Downstairs, Michael and Selma suddenly awaken and realize that the house is coming apart. They try to open the door, but it's locked from outside. Selma doesn't want to leave her new friends behind, so she screams for them, but her father quickly pulls pulls her back as the house begins to crumble. The two then get inside Deborah's car and flee from there. Michael has a very hard time driving because the visibility is almost zero and the car is starting to disintegrate, but he somehow takes them out of the storm safely. After hours and hours of driving, they arrive at a field and it stops raining. A panicked Selma asks where they are going, but Michael himself doesn't know, so he ends up shouting at her in frustration.
Honey, I don't know what's going on with this rain.
He then goes outside to catch a breather, but the wet grass burns his legs, prompting him to return. To his shock, Selma is missing from the back seat. She has actually run away on her own, but is having difficulties due to the acidic land. When Selma can't bear the pain any longer, she climbs onto a structure, but it slowly begins to sink due to the corrosive land. Just when it seems that she's going to die, her heroic father shows up and rescues her from the structure. He then carries her on his back and somehow takes her to their vehicle. Michael's legs are badly burnt in the process, and he soon passes out due to the pain. Fortunately, when the sun rises, they are rescued by a military team and rushed to the hospital. Michael is then given immediate treatment. While Selma asks about her family, she soon learns that her dad's girlfriend, Karen, died a few days ago. However, she chooses not to tell him for now. The movie ends as Selma goes to her recovering father and sleeps in his arms. Subscribe for more videos like this, turn on notifications, and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.